Vice-Chancellor, distinguished guests, ladies, gentlemen, and graduands. Thank you, Professor Ballard, so much for that introduction and those very kind words. It's very daunting to hear oneself described, and I can barely recognise myself. I am absolutely delighted to be here today. It really is a huge honour to have this degree bestowed on me by the university as recognition of my career, and I'm extremely proud, as are the members of my family present. I didn't set out to be a journalist, far less to be legal editor of the Times. My career wasn't planned. What I did was to follow my interests. And if I have one message today, it is to do what you enjoy, and don't be forced into a line of work because it is profitable or convenient. Follow your passions, but retain an open mind, because things are not always what you expect. I grew up in the unfashionable suburbs of North London, in Edgware, Mill Hill, and Barnet. I think, like many families, mine is an example of extraordinary social mobility. My parents came from ordinary families, my mother's from London, and my father's from Lithuania. His family, Roman Catholics, had emigrated around the turn of the last century and settled near Motherwell, outside Glasgow. My grandfather was a miner. My grandmother, whom I never met, died of pneumonia, aged 34, after giving birth to 9 children. She was illiterate. She didn't sign their marriage certificate, just made a mark. They were a very large and not well-off family, so at 18, my father headed for London with little more than a bag of apples and a packet of Fox's Glacier mints. He met my mother, but war broke out and he joined the RAF. They were married in 1942, but soon after, his plane was shot down in a bombing raid over Germany. Half the crew were killed, but my father parachuted out, and after 2 days on the run in Germany, he was caught and became a prisoner of war for 2.5 years in Stalag Luft 3, the camp famously from which the Great Escape took place. On returning to Civvy Street, my father managed, through contacts of a fellow POW, to be taken on as an articled clerk, and he qualified at night school as a solicitor, which became his lifelong career. I think he was always very proud that I ended up reporting on the law for the Times. My original passion, though, was English literature, and as you've heard, I read this at UEA and toyed with doing a further degree, but decided instead to try for a job. Literally, I wrote about 100 letters. My mother kept me at it and was endlessly encouraging, and I would have been happy with any job in the media involving the written or spoken word, from publishing to radio. But, as is often the way, my first job set my path. It was with a television news agency, a very lowly job, filing newspaper cuttings. The cuttings library, of course, was what journalists relied on in those days when researching stories. This was well before the internet. That led to the next job, a trainee journalist post with the Times Higher Education Supplement, reporting on the news of universities and colleges. My first job on a national newspaper was with the Daily Telegraph. I'd wanted to be a general reporter, but they offered me a specialist job covering art sales, the world of the auction houses. Somewhat daunted, I told the editor, then Bill Deeds, that I'd never set foot in an auction house. "Oh, that doesn't matter," he said, "you'll pick it up." With journalism, it's certainly true that it is a portable skill which can be applied to any specialism you may report on. Sometimes people ask me how I became a legal journalist. I didn't. I became a journalist, and law was the specialist job I later landed. To complete the story, I'd always wanted to be a general reporter on the Times, and so after a couple of years with the Telegraph, I applied and was taken on at the Times. It was great fun. This was still the age of typewriters and hot metal, printers setting pages with lead slugs of type. When the job of legal correspondent became vacant, I applied, and the editor was somewhat concerned that I wasn't a lawyer, but I argued that I was writing not just for lawyers, but for the general public. I stayed in that job for nearly 38 years, as you've heard, becoming legal editor on the way and editing first a legal supplement and then the weekly law pages as part of my job covering the law. The task in that, as throughout my career, has really been about opening up the law, reporting on key cases, and trying to make them intelligible to the lay public, and reporting on the news of the legal profession and the judiciary, both what they wanted reported and especially what they did not. I'm still involved with reporting on the law, as you've heard, and I'm extremely grateful to the University of Law for sponsoring my podcast series last year on judges, a series of interviews with all those judges who held the top posts of Lord Chief Justice and President of the Supreme Court. Freed from the constraints of being in office, they were much more open about the highs and lows of their time, the challenges they faced and their regrets. This year, I'm embarking on a follow-up series of interviews with the Lord Chancellors, better known as the Secretaries of State for Justice. It's a world that has changed greatly in the time I've been covering it, as has journalism. We reporters moved away from smoke-filled newsrooms, printers, rolling presses, long boozy lunches, to clean offices with computers, digital production, and round-the-clock news online. Meanwhile, the legal profession came out of its cloistered world, started to advertise, promote itself, use PR firms, and talk with the media. And above all, the internet arrived. Senior judges gave press conferences and started to make occasional appearances on TV or radio. Now, of course, cameras have moved into courtrooms. At first, it was to cover proceedings in the Supreme Court and some appeal court hearings. Now, the sentencing of judges is broadcast. So the law and its workings have become accessible as never before to the general public. The legal world, then, is very different. It's more open, more varied, with lawyers moving between firms or chambers in a way they never did. And there are many kinds of work across private practice, government, commerce and industry. And new challenges. How will the law make use of AI? To what extent will it make aspects of legal work redundant or help with legal work that lawyers do? There are still hurdles for women, say, juggling with careers with time off to have babies, or for people without funds. But much more support is available in the way of bursaries and scholarships. Hard work and ability really do pay off. Women now make up more than half of new entrants to the profession, and we have our first Lady Chief Justice. Lawyers sometimes get a bad press, but that's nothing new. First thing we do, said Dick the Butcher in Shakespeare's Henry VI, is kill all the lawyers. If it's any comfort, journalists rank even worse in public esteem, down at the bottom with estate agents. But in reality, when there's a crisis of public confidence or a scandal, the cry goes up for a judge or a lawyer to sort things out, usually through a public inquiry. Lawyers really do remain the bulwarks against injustice, whether representing an individual or a company in a trial or a dispute, or ensuring the government doesn't overstep the mark, or the law in exercising its powers. So I wish everyone here well. You genuinely are in a position to change lives and to make a difference. And thank you to the university and those responsible for putting me forward today for this very special honour. I feel extraordinarily privileged. Thank you.